This is Garis, Masculist MGTOW flyers. That is 2-3-page essays on the themes of Masculism and MGTOW, written by and read aloud by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. This is flyer number 342, entitled Masculist and Mohammedan Awakenings. Description. This flyer claims that men need a new religion, that is, a powerful new ideology that they can use to intellectually crush the feminazis to restore their self-pride in being males. When Mohammed invented Islam, he galvanized the Arabs, who now had their own monotheism, so could look to Christians and Jews in the eye as equals. This had an energizing effect on them, which later allowed them to conquer the Middle East, North Africa, and even Spain. Masculism is that new ideology, that new religion for men, that galvanizes men to destroy the feminazis before they wipe out whole populations with their control of the divorce courts, making them so toxic for men that 2/3 of young men reject marriage and paternity. The feminazis have to be stopped, either via destruction of their ideas, via the new masculist religion, or with bullets. The fly itself. Masculist and Mohammedan Awakenings by Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Email profhugodegaris@yahoo.com. Website profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Most weekdays I travel in the Melbourne trams to attend Melbourne University seminars in pure math, math physics, philosophy and computer science. I observe the women, especially the younger women, who have absorbed feminist ideology, today's religion for most women, which has profoundly changed them. For most of history, women were seen as rather useless, good only for growing and raising children, which is why men merely tolerated them but did not respect them, because women were weak, who could not control a plough, so were economically useless, or who were hopeless as warriors, so were useless in warrior cultures, etc. It's only since men gave women the contraceptive pill, household gadgets, modern medicine, high life expectancies, that women have been able to move into traditional male domains of having to live in and manipulate the external world. This transition for women is only a few decades old, that is, very recent in historical terms. Women are not known for being fiercely independent creatures who are psychologically tough, fighting their own battles. Most women are rather psychologically lazy, preferring to play the victim role and let men solve their problems instead of getting off their fat parasitic asses and solve their problems themselves with their own efforts. After the 1960s and the pill, second-wave feminism arose as millions of upper middle-class women felt bored and alienated in being housewives with their 2 kids off to school and with time on their hands, feeling ennui and asking themselves, "Is this all?" Out of this female frustration came the second wave of feminism, which pushed for equal rights for women so that they could enter the professions and the workplace. In the 70s and 80s, the women's lib movement largely achieved all their major goals: getting equal pay for equal work, equal legal access to the professions and to the workplace, the right to terminate an unwanted pregnancy, brackets, the abortion right, aka the MARA, maternity rejection right, etc. Second-wave feminism morphed into third-wave feminism, as the success of second-wave feminism went to the heads of the daughters of the second-wave feminist mothers, who then wanted more. They wanted power at the expense of men. So these third-wave daughters pushed for female power, and being women, did not put any of the blame or responsibility on themselves for their female situation. Instead, they childishly blamed men for all their women's feminist problems, resulting in young men at university being drowned by third-wave rhetoric about how toxic men are, how guilty men should feel about how men have treated women in the past, how conscious men should feel should feel in their privileged positions as seen by third wavers. As a result of this tsunami of feminist rhetoric and institutional feminist energy, young men now feel swamped, crushed, silenced, so are not happy, so many young men simply don't go to university, preferring to avoid the student debt trap by going to trade school and getting a diploma that gives them a real skill, rather than a useless university diploma that gives them knowledge but not a real skill that the economy values and is prepared to pay good salaries for, unlike many of women's choices, which the economy does not value and pays low salaries for, leaving these women with large student debts that they spend years of their lives paying off. In many universities now, male students are outnumbered 2 to 1. That is, the percentage of women at universities is reaching 70%. And given the prevalence of third-wave, power-grabbing, third-wave feminist rhetoric that saturates campuses, with third-wave young women feeling fully justified in being rude and abusive to men, whom these young feminists see as oppressors of women, rapers of women, as toxic, who deserve to be sneered at by women, who need to be taught a lesson by feminists that men are to treat women better or be punished by women. Young campus males today are drowned in such feminist rhetoric and values and don't like it, but feel powerless to do anything about it because they lack the means to change their situation. They merely grin and bear it. For male students to change the gender political status quo, a new religion, a new ideology aimed specifically at men is needed. Now what follows is a presentation of a very close historical analogy with men's current situation in a feminist-dominated ideological landscape, and with the Arabs in the centuries before Mohammed came along and gave the Arabs a new ideology, a new religion that galvanized them. So I'll talk a bit about what happened to them so that I can draw a close analogy with what now needs to happen with men. Arabs are an average IQ people. Their average IQ is about 85, which is about the world average, according to the World IQ map. The Arabs lived in the deserts with their goats and their desert animals, the camels, which could walk for days without water, so were a vital element in the trade routes between distant cultural and economic centres. The peoples these Arab camel traders came into contact with were often Christians and Jews, both of whom were a lot brighter than Arabs and who looked down on them, treating them not only as genetic inferiors due to their 15 plus IQ points lower average IQs, in brackets, just as US whites do to American blacks, since US blacks have an average IQ that is 15 points lower than the whites, who have an average IQ of 100. Close brackets. But also as culturally inferior due to the fact that the Arabs were still in the, in brackets, as seen by Christians and Jews, primitive polytheistic phase, that is, not being monotheistic. Most Christians and Jews had their one God, and the Arabs did not. Christians and Jews sneered at Arabs. They traded with them because business is business, but did not respect Arabs, whom they saw as beneath them, an inferior people not to be taken seriously due to both their inferior average intelligence and their primitive religious ideas. In the 600s AD, a youngish Arab camel trader by the name of Mohammed deeply resented the contemptuous attitudes of nearly all the peoples he traded with towards his people, the Arabs. He hated it, and being a brilliant, open-minded, charismatic individual that he was, he set about trying to understand why these Christians and Jews looked down on the Arabs the way they did. Muhammad did not like being looked down on, being treated as an inferior being, so was motivated to change the situation, to give the Arabs high status in the eyes of the Christians and the Jews, who definitely had more advanced and sophisticated cultures than his people did. Not only Muhammad, but many Arabs at the time resented being seen as an inferior people by their more sophisticated neighbours and trading partners, so that a collective inferiority complex was felt by the Arab people for centuries, which undermined their sense of self-worth, their level of well-being, since it's now known that people who feel themselves low on the social status hierarchy have lower self-esteem and even have lower life expectancies. Mohammed wrestled with the question of how to increase the status level of Arabs in the eyes of Christians and Jews, and finally came up with the conclusion that the major reason why Arabs were sneered at by Christians and Jews was because Arabs were so primitive that they didn't even have their own monotheism. So Mohammed, being the brilliant, open-minded, charismatic individual that he was, set about inventing a monotheism for the Arabs, which is now called Islam, that is, to obey. This is how any religion starts. Usually one brilliant, charismatic individual dreams up the properties of the God he invents, nearly always a he, and then starts preaching his new God ideas. Many such God creators fail, and we don't hear of them again. But some succeed moderately and survive for a few generations, whereas some, if the new religion meets the psychological needs of large numbers of his people, then it can spread, being accepted by the minds of millions of people, making it a major religion. Christianity did this. Judaism did too, but to a much smaller extent, since not anyone can become a Jew, whereas anyone can become a Christian. So Muhammad created a monotheism for the Arabs that was open to anyone, that was strongly consciously or unconsciously influenced by ideas that he learned from his trading contacts with the Christians and the Jews. The religion that he created, that he dreamt up out of thin air, is now classified as an Abrahamic religion, since its basis comes from Judaism and Christianity, which were founded on the ideas of the God-creator Abraham. Soon, large numbers of Arabs were noticing that with their new religion, their new monotheism, their status in the eyes of their trading partners increased, and it was intoxicating, so different from their earlier feelings of inferiority and being looked down on by their trading partners and neighbours. Actually, it was a lot more than that. It was intoxicating, galvanizing, liberating. It went to their heads. It gave them a new, much higher status and supercharged them, giving the Arabs as a people a new collective energy. Over the next few centuries, these monotheistic Arabs then went on to conquer vast territories in the Middle East, Northern Africa, and even Spain in distant, faraway Western Europe, until the French stopped them. Why am I talking so much about Arabs? And what does it have to do with men's situation in today's colleges? Question mark. Ask yourself, what happened to the Arabs, and what gave them the mental energy and dynamism to go on and conquer such a vast territory and to create a thriving Arabian, actually Mohammedan, culture that revived Greek learning and eventually spread it to Europe via Jewish translations of Greek into Latin that sparked the Renaissance in Europe? The answer is that the Arabs got a new religion, a new ideology that caused them to have a new status in the eyes of their neighbours and trading partners. Superior self-worth is extremely valuable to people. It has such an important impact on them that even their life expectancy is influenced by how strong a sense of self-worth one has. The Arabs were utterly galvanized by Muhammad's new monotheism. It transformed them, giving them a means to look Christians and Jews eye to eye as equals in religious and hence cultural terms. It was an intoxicating feeling for them. Now it's time to make the historical analogy. Young men today on campus, and men in general in modern Western cultures, need a new religion so that they can increase their level of self-worth. After being so attacked by feminist doctrine, telling men that men are pigs, men are toxic, men are oppressors, men are morally inferior, men are the inferior sex to be looked down on by women, etc., etc. That new religion for men is masculism. Masculism is a set of ideas that give men the intellectual tools to intellectually crush feminism, since masculism is based much more on science, that is, on reality, whereas feminism is more religion-based in the sense that it preaches to women what women have desperately wanted to hear for centuries, that is, that women are men's equals, that anything a man can do, a woman can do. Masculism, however, teaches men that men are the superior sex by telling them that science shows this to be the case. Men have 10% larger brains thanks to women's hypergamy, that is, the female instinct to mate with superior males to get these men's superior DNA for her kids. So that over 1 million years of female monopolized control of reproduction, that is, it is women who decide which man ejaculates inside her, men are taller, bigger, stronger, fiercer and smarter than women because that is what women wanted sexually. Men are 4 IQ points smarter than women on average, with a 10% larger IQ variance, so that men dominate the moron and genius ends of the IQ distribution. So that since the genii are males, it's not surprising that men have won 99% of the science Nobel Prizes. Women have always been parasites of men. It was men who did the hunting, because women were stuck at home with the babies and small children, so could not chase game for days on end far from home. So women depended on men for their very survival. Women thus evolved to be prostitutes to men, so that they could become more effective parasites of men, better able to bribe men with access to their vaginas, in exchange for men's scarce male-hunted meat, especially in times of starvation, when death was just one missed meal away. With masculinist ideas, men have the intellectual tools to lash back at feminists, at feminazis, who harangue men with feminist rhetoric. Once young men on campus absorb masculinist ideas, they can harangue back at the feminazis in the sex, or rather gender, political war by angrily berating the feminazis with masculinist ideas that women are parasites who oppress men far more than vice versa, since women are financial parasites of men who manslave men, who have taken over the divorce courts and made divorce so toxic for men that they have become indirect genociders. Masculisted men on campus can verbally attack feminazis, teaching them the reverse of what these feminazis are preaching. That is, that women are the greater oppressors, since they are such parasites of men who contribute almost nothing to the generation of cultures, given women's scientifically verified intellectual inferiority to men, women's pathetic 1% of science Nobel Prizes. Men who have absorbed the new masculinist religion are now capable of verbally attacking women, especially the feminazi bitch variety, who feel they have the right to abuse men with their feminist ideas. It will be a rude shock to the millions of young feminists on campus to be confronted with young masculists who hurl abuse at them for being fluffy feminist hypocrites who mostly study fluffy crap majors, making them economically useless, and then expecting, in all their fluffy feminist hypocrisy, to be able to parasite off the labour and money of some gullible man-slave so that she can have her kids paid for by him, brought up in a house that he also pays for. Masculisted men will put enormous moral pressure on these fluffy feminist hypocrite student women to fib up or be spat at by masculists. It will be traumatic for these women as men suddenly get masculisted, like being converted, like the Arabs, to monotheism. These men in their millions will become energized, galvanized, inspired, and then collectively wipe out the feminazi element on campus by attacking it with their superior male intelligence and much greater level of verbal aggression due to their much higher levels of testosterone in their blood. The feminists will be blown away, their ideology destroyed, as masculists accuse these hated feminazis of being indirect genociders, indirectly wiping out whole populations due to their control of the divorce courts, which themselves need to be made men fair. Masculism will then spread from the campuses into the society at large. Journalists will pick up on these ideas and spread them to the masses, so that in time the gender politicians will feel motivated to men fair the gender laws. Young women will be told if they want to have babies again, so that quality young men stop refusing to give them their sperm, then young women will need to vote with men to amend further gender laws, reform the divorce laws to make them fair to men, to bring in the paternity rejection rate, to socially engineer women to fib up, become FIPs, that's financially independent persons, or be punished by men for being fluffies who don't get a man, forcing them to rot on the shelf, manless, loveless, sexless, babyless, and increasingly spat at. I notice in the trams, and just walking about town, that women stare at me, sensing that there's something different about me that they can't quite put their finger on. Some, I feel, sense that they, that is women, cannot control me, because I know that I have the masculine self-confidence, that if some feminazi bitch tries to harangue me with feminist rhetoric, that I can more than give her a taste of her own gender political medicine, because I'm intellectually armed with masculinist ideas, and if I wanted, I could blow her out of the room with a tirade of masculinist rhetoric which would shut up any woman. Think of the impact that that kind of masculine self-confidence and mentality would have on women if millions of young men feel the same as I feel. It is that vision, as masculinist ideas spread and spread throughout Western culture, that so enthuses me, making me feel that it is now only a question of time before masculinist ideas, the new religion for men, has spread enough for millions of men to take back their self-pride, their sense of superiority that is based on science. Masculists don't have to say, we have God on our side, because they have something far better. They have science on their side, which is a far more reliable knowledge generator than the religious superstitions of earlier centuries. Masculists can hurl masculist gender facts at women, crushing them intellectually, which is a far more humane alternative than shooting feminazis in their millions in order to stop the indirect genocide that these feminazi bitches are causing due to their control of the divorce courts. So, to those male readers of this flyer, if you have felt inspired by this message, then spread it to your friends so that the number of masculisted men, newly religioned men, can grow, so that a masculist tsunami hits women in universities, so that third-wave feminism is destroyed, so that the gender laws are men-fared, so that men can get their pride back. Personally, I'm proud to be a white European male, which is the most creative and intellectual group on the planet in history, who win most of the Nobel Prizes with their colonial offshoot, the US, who create and build whole cultures. It is men who are inventing the sex bots and the artificial wombs, which will soon undermine women's two traditional monopolies, causing them to go into deep depression when men prefer to grow their own kids and prefer to sex their bots, since 3/4 of women are either fat or, far worse, obese, and hence are sexually repulsive to men. Women will be forced to be much nicer to men, or they will be punished by a masculistic, galvanized religion that gives men the confidence and self-esteem to tell feminazis to go to hell. And if these feminazi-type women don't nicen up, then masculist men will send them there by making their lives a misery, harangued on all sides by very angry, newly self-assured men who now have masculist ideas, masculist intellectual tools in their heads to use as ammunition to destroy feminazism. Cheers. Prof. Dr. Hugo de Garis. Prof. Hugo de Garis at yahoo.com. Website, profhugodegaris.wordpress.com. Brackets, contains links to 300 plus YouTube, Minds, BitChute, masculist essays/videos, and to the book, Masculism, Men's Rebellion Against Being Manslaves to Women, an e-textbook of 300 plus masculist flyers for men's studies courses. Ciao.